Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we are going to be building this beautiful weather forecast website. So as you can see, so the moment you enter the name of a city, we are going to get weather forecast for that particular city. So we enter another city called Yonkers. So we are going to get the weather forecast for that particular city. So we enter Accra. So we are going to build this using Azure Functions and then Django. So let's get into it. So this is going to be a simple flow of our application. A user wants to get the weather forecast for a city. The user submits the name of the city. The name will now be passed into our Django view. The Django view will now call on Azure Functions saying that, hey, one of my users want to know the weather condition in this particular city. Now, the Django function will now also call on OpenWeatherMap API. So we are going to use an API in our Django function to fetch the weather conditions. So the Django function will now also fetch the data from OpenWeather's API. After fetching the data, it will now pass the data back to us in a JSON format. And now having the data condition, the weather condition in that particular city, we now process the data and present it back to our user. So this is just going to be a simple flow of how the entire application is going to work. Now let's get into building it. In order for us to be able to build our functions locally and deploy it to Azure, we need core tools installed. So if you don't already have it, I'll put the link to that in the description so that you can download it. So you simply just come here and then you scroll down and then you download it. So if you're using Windows, you choose the version. If you're using Mac, you go ahead and use the brew. If you're using Linux, and then you also use this to install core tools on your machine. Now that we have core tools installed on our machine, the next thing we are going to do is that we are going to install Azure tools as well. So we need Azure Function to be able to create our functions locally on our machine. So to do that, simply open your VS Code and come to extensions and search for Azure tools. So as you can see, I have it here. I simply click on it. Because I've already installed it, so if you have not, you just click here and then you will install. When you install Azure tools, it will install all these provisions for you, these Azure services for you. So you'll be able to provision app services, Azure Functions, Azure databases, Azure storage directly in your VS Code without opening your web portal. Next thing we are going to do is that you need to log in into your Azure account in your VS Code. So I've already logged into my Azure account. So if I come here and I click on Azure, so you see that I'm already logged in. So when you are logged in, it will show you all your subscriptions you have here. So far I have only one subscription, which is the Azure for Students. So with this subscription, it tells you all the provisions, the services I can provision directly in this particular subscription. So if you have multiple subscriptions, you can choose the subscription you want to do provisioning in. And then you can simply do your provision and deploy whatever you want to deploy directly from your VS Code. But because I have only one subscription, I'm just going to leave it as that. So as you can see, when I install the Azure Core Tools, all the services that came with it, I have my app services, I have my Azure Arc, I have container apps, I have Azure Functions as well. So, and this is the one we need. So now that you have this done, and everything is working all right. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I want to create a project directly locally on my machine, test it when everything works all right before I actually deploy it to my web service, to my Azure account. So you can see down here that we have a workspace. So I'm going to be building my project directly locally on my workspace, then I'll deploy it to my Azure account. So to simply do that, I will simply come and click on this particular Azure function logo here. I'll click on it. It will ask me the type of app I want to create. What I want to just create a function, I want to create a project. So, or I want to create a container kind of project. So I'll just click on create a project. Now at the top, let me maximize that so that we can see. Now at the top, you see they are going to ask me to choose a name for my app. The first thing is my directory. So you can choose a new directory for it or the one you just created. So since I just created a folder for this particular project, I'm just going to choose that. And then to ask me the programming language I want to use. So I want to be using Python. And then to ask me the version model. So the type of Python programming model I want to use. So far, the version 2 is what I'm going to use. I'll click on that. Now it will ask me the version of Python I want to use. So I'll just choose that. If you want to use a Python interpreter in your virtual environment, you can do that, but I'm not going to use that. I'll just click on this. Now the type of trigger you want to create, whether you want to create an HTTP trigger, you want to create a block trigger, you want to create a Cosmos DB trigger, like I explained. Some of these particular services, so this one like this, the timer trigger is like you set a time for it, and anytime when it's that particular time, the code will automatically run. Or say you create an event grid and then you connect it to your database and something happens, it can automatically trigger. But in our case, we are not choosing any of this particular. We just want to create an HTTP trigger, in a sense that we are creating a weather app. So we want that anytime somebody submits a specific data, which will be a city to a URL, which our Django will handle, then it will trigger our function for us. So we are going to choose an HTTP trigger. So it will ask me to choose a name for my function. So I'm going to go with the one I created here, as weather function app. So I just want everything to be in sync with the folder I created. So it will ask me to choose the type of authorization I need. So if I choose a function, it means that nobody can actually access the API or the response for my function without having a specific key, a secret key. So that it means that this is not going to be accessible for everybody to actually manipulate without having an access key to actually access my function. But with the anonymous, it means that it is open to anybody. I can just build it, give it to you, and you can directly have access to it, and then you build your application with it, because it will not need any key to be able to authenticate whether you own the function or not. And at the administrator level just basically means that the function will be limited to only administrators to be able to have access to. So in my case, I don't want everybody to have access to it, so I'm going to limit it to having a key. So I'm going to choose a function. So the first thing it will do is that, as you can see down here, it will provision a virtual environment for us. So let's wait for that to be provisioned. So as you can see, our function is created for us. So you can see it will give you a pop-up here about how to run the function. So now that our function is created for us, so you can see this is just a sample function that we can test out to see whether our function is working or not. So let's go back to the project folder and see what is created for us. So as you can see from here, that we have a virtual environment that is created for us. So this is a virtual environment in which we are going to be, all our requirements and any other thing like keys and stuff like that are going to be run in this particular virtual environment. So we have a virtual environment created for us, and this is actually the function key, the function itself file where you can create the function, which is a Python file, as you can see. And then we have our hosting.json. So this hosts some of the connections you have in this particular function, like you want to encrypt stuff, you want to do your connection, so all those things will happen here. So now that we understand that, the next thing is our requirement.test. So with these requirements, anytime you are provisioning your function on Azure, all the requirements that will be listed here will be installed automatically for you. So make sure that anytime you install a requirement, you come and add it here and save, so that anytime you are deploying your app, you will not have any problem with that. So just remember that anytime you install a new requirement for your project, you come and add into this particular requirement.test. So to run this particular function, all we have to do is that we have to open our terminal, and then we'll start our virtual environment. So in our case, we have our function here. So we have our terminal open. So let me go to terminals. So, and you can see that we are in the particular project we created. That is in the folder where the function was created. So I'm going to open a command prompt. So as you can see, Visual Studio Code automatically activates your virtual environment for you But if it doesn't activate the virtual environment for you, you need to activate it, this particular virtual environment, and that you can see in this particular in your project. So you can see your virtual environment is here. So if you cd, you will see you have your script and then you have your activate. So you just cd and then you activate this particular virtual environment. So now that we have our virtual environment started for us, the next thing we are going to do is that we are just going to start the app. So to start the app, you just do fun, then you do start, and then you click enter. So as you can see, our function has been created for us. So as the function is created, you'll be given a URL here. So you can see that we have a URL here. So we can access our function using this particular URL. Now, before we access the URL, let's go and explain and see what this particular sample code will do. We are going to change this code to the one that we need. But then let's me explain this so that you understand what this particular code will do. So anytime a user visits this particular URL that I was talking about, it is going to trigger this particular function. And if a user gives a name, there is a name, it is going to display the hello, then the user's name, then to tell the user that this is HTTP triggered function executed successfully. So as you can see, it's a simple code. It's a simple Python code, and this is what it does. Anytime you create a Python function, so this is the one that will be created for you to test to see if everything is running correctly before you actually run your function. So now that we understand that, let's just copy this. So we copy that and open a browser. So in our browser, let's paste that. So you can see that our function is running successfully. You can see an HTTP triggered function execution is successful. So now let's pass a name and see whether our function will work successfully. Now to pass a name, as you know, in Python, so we are just going to pass a name. So I'm going to do question mark, then I'll do name, then equals, then the name I want to pass. So let me say my name, Robert. So as you can see, it displays a hello, then my name comes, then it will say HTTPS function triggered successfully. So it means that the demo function is successful. So you can change this to anything you want, any name you want. Say you want to try Elizabeth. So you can see it's triggered successfully. So you can just, so the moment you see this, it means that your function is working successfully. Let's open Postman and try that as well. Postman. So in my Postman, let me just create a REST API. So I'll paste this and then I'll click on submit. You see that it's not going to show me the same thing that I was saying. So HTTPS function triggered successfully. Please pass a name to the query. So to pass a name, so my key is going to be name. Then my value is going to be the name of the person I want to pass. Then I'll just click on send. So you can see that the function is passed successfully. Now take notice of the name, the variable name here. So when we come back to our code and you scroll to the top and you look at it, so you can see that this particular variable that is picking the name from our URL is called name. So if I change this particular variable to anything, it means that that is the variable I need to use in my URL to take the object and then pass it to my function. So I want you to take notice of that. So anytime this particular variable changes, it means that that key too must also change. That key name must also change as well in your URL. So now that we know that our function, our test function is working successfully, the next thing we are going to do is that we are going to build our own custom function. So remember that what we want our function to do is that our function is going to receive a variable name, which is a key from our Django project. Then it is going to pass it to our OpenWeather API and then fetch our weather conditions for us. So that is what we are going to be doing. So I'm going to modify the code to do that. Then I'll explain what the code will do for us. So this is our function. So this is our function to fetch our weather conditions from OpenWeather. So the first thing we are going to do is that we are going to change our variable name to city. So we want to be passing the variable name city to our OpenWeather API. So say somebody enters the city New York. So what Django will do is that Django will assign the city New York to a variable city, and then it will pass it to our function. Now our function, knowing that we have a variable called city, will replace city with New York and then pass it to OpenWeather to get us the weather conditions. So if we don't have a city, it is going to pass us a status code as 400. So it means that we don't have a city name in the query we just submitted. Or maybe the name you submitted is not the name of a city. You can basically write a random text and it's not a name of the city. So we want our code to know that. So anytime you write anything gibberish or you write something that a city that doesn't exist, it will provide us a status code. Then the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to take my key, my API key. You know that anytime you are dealing with API, you are going to be given a key, and that key is supposed to authenticate you in the API providers platform that you have access to. You have an account with them or you have access to their API. So OpenWeather is going to give us an API. And as you know, because of security, you can't put the API directly in your code. You need to hide it you need to hide your API in a virtual environment, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm going to set my API in a virtual environment. So anytime the function runs and there is no API code, I want the function to tell me that, oh, Robert, you don't have an API code. So go and get an API key from OpenWeather. So that is what I'm doing here. So anytime I don't have a key set, it will pass that to me. Then I'll go and get my key and then I'll come and set it. Now the URL. So the weather URL. So to actually have access to the weather forecast from OpenWeather. So this is their URL that you need to use, their API URL. So the first thing you need to do is that you need to pass a city. So as you can see here, so this is a city, the value that we assign at the top as a variable. So we'll pass it here. Then the next thing is that they also need a key, your key. So I need to append the key as well. So I put the key here and then I'll post it. So anytime all this is authenticated, I should get a response, a JSON response from them. So if I have an error, it's going to tell me that, oh, it wasn't able to fetch the data, and then it will send me a status code 500. So this is simply what the code does. I also need a request installed. So as you can see, I'm going to use request. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to install request in my virtual environment. So let me stop the function for the meantime. So I've stopped the function. So I'll do pip install request. So it's telling me pip is not available. So let me upgrade that. Oh, the name. So it's requests, not request. So I need S at the end. So our request is installed. So now we can now import our request here. So import request. So we also use OS here. So let's import OS as well. Import OS. So now our code is set, our function is set. Now let's run our function again and see. So remember, so we'll do func start. Let's wait for that to be started. So our function is started successfully. Let's go back to our browser and see whether it works. So we come back to our browser and then we'll refresh this. So as you can see, the function is working. So instead of passing name, you can see that it has been changed to city. Please pass a city name on the query string or in the query request body. So, and because it didn't work, if you look at our URL very well, let me increase that a bit again. If you look at our URL, the variable I pass here is called is name, not city. That is why it didn't work. So let me change that to city. Then I'll pass a city name. So city is equal to, let me say New York. So as you can see, they are telling me that I don't have OpenWeather API key set. So let's go back to OpenWeather, sign up and get an API key. So to have an API key of OpenWeather, simply go to openweather.org. So you go there, then you simply sign up and then you have API key. So if you sign up and you log in, you just click here, come to my keys. So you come to my keys and you have your API keys here. You can use them. Then you simply set them. So now that we have my OpenWeather key, you can go ahead and take a look at how OpenWeather API works. Maybe you want to do something different from what I'm doing, or maybe your requirements is a bit different. Say you are building a tracking application, you are building an alert application, you need to know what type of API key you want to use or API URL you need to use in your project. So you can go through their API and see how their API works. But in my case, I already know what I want to do. I just need weather forecast. You need to also take a look at the pricing and know which one meets your needs or your requirements. So because I have my OpenWeather API, let's go back to our project and set that. So I'll come back to my OpenWeather API. I'll come back to my virtual environment. You know, you can simply set your API key in your virtual environment, and I want to set that. So to set my OpenWeather API in my virtual environment, all I need to do is that I need to do set. Then the variable name I use for my API key. So when we come back here, so you can see that I'm using this particular variable. So I'm having OpenWeather API key. I'll copy that. Come back to my terminal and then I'll paste it. Then I'll do equals to. Now I'll paste my API key. I don't want to paste it here, but I'll forward that. You know what? Let me just paste it. I'll reset it after this video. Come back. So you do set, then the variable name you use for your project, or the particular key you want to hide, or whatever you want to hide in your virtual environment and calling it in your project, you just do the variable name and then you paste the key here and then you click on enter. And as you can see, our API key is set. So let's start our project again, func, then start. Let's give it a minute to get started. So our project is started again. So let's go back to our browser and test it again. So now our URL key is set. So let's refresh and see whether we'll have some magic. And just like that, we can see that we are now having a response. So in less than 15 minutes, I've been able to build a function. So you can see that the function is working beautifully. So now that this function is working, let's go back to our Postman and test it again. So you remember the function, the key has changed. So you can see that it is not telling me to pass a city name. So let me change it to city name and see. So let me change it to city and refresh. I should get an error because it's not a city name. So you can see that error fetching weather data. So, and you can see when we go back to our code, like I was saying, so it means that because I passed something that is not the name of the city, that is why it's telling me that it could not geolocate, OpenWeather could not geolocate the name I gave them to be a city, so it's not able to pass me the data. So let's go back and change it to a city's name. So I'll change this to a city's name. So let me go back to New York. New York. Send it, submit. So, and as you can see, we are now having a response from OpenWeather. You can even visualize this particular data. So let's visualize it in in our Postman. So let's give it a minute to visualize it in a tabular form. So, and as you can see, our data has been visualized. So you can see that we have the temperature, the fields like the minimum, the maximum, the humidity, and all that. So you can see that everything is tabulated, and it gives you up to 6 days or so, or 5 days for if you're using the API key for free. So let me change it to another city. So let me say Yonkers. So as you can see, everything is working fine. Let me change this to Accra. So as you can see, everything is working fine. Let me change this to Lagos. So as you can see, so it means that our function is working directly. So anytime this particular URL is visited, or anytime a city name is passed, it is going to be passed to our function. Then our function is going to fetch us the data. So as simple as that, our function is working beautifully. Now let's go back to our code. Remember, we installed a request to get this particular code working. So let's go back to our requirements and add a request to it. So in our requirements file, we are going to add requests. So the name of the library you install. So what I installed was request. So as you can see, I just added that, and now this is done. So now that our project is working beautifully on our local machine, the next thing we want to do is that we want to deploy it to our Azure account, so that we'll be having access to it, and then we can now build our Django project, and then we'll take it from there. So the next thing we are going to do is that if you have any cleanup to do, you basically do your cleanup. For me, all I had to do was to add my request to my requirements file, and I'm all set. So to deploy this to our Azure account, let's go back to our Azure. So we come back to the top, click on Azure. So you can see that we have our workspace here, and then we have our Azure provisioning applications here. So the first thing we need to do is that we want to create an Azure app. So you can basically deploy it straightforward from here, or you can create an app and then you deploy it. So whichever works for you. So if you want to create an app, you simply come like this, and then you choose, and then you create an app. Then when you are done, you create, and then you can now click on deploy, and then you deploy, whichever works for you. So I'm going to create a weather app first, then I'll deploy my project to it. The first thing I'm going to do is that, so I'll come back, right click on the function, and click on Azure Function app, and then I'll choose the advanced type. Then I'll come here, and then I'll come and enter a name. So I'll call my app weather function app 001. Then I'll enter. It will ask me to choose the plan. So I just want to use the consumption plan. So I'll choose on consumption. It will ask me which region I want to deploy my project. So I'll choose East US. Then it will ask me for the Python version. I'll choose the 3.10. Then it will ask me to create a resource group. So I want to create a resource group. If you already have a resource group, as you can see, it will pop up. Then you choose it. So I want my resource group to have the same name as my app. So I'll choose that. Then it will ask me to create a storage account as well. So I want to create a storage account. And I want my storage account to have the same name as my Azure app. So I'll choose that. Then I can create, it will ask you to create an Azure Insight as well. So I'm going to do that same name. And then now I'll wait for my Azure app to be created. So as you can see, when you come to your terminal and then you click on Azure, you can see that all your provisioning is happening. So we'll just give it a minute to be done. So you can see that our provisioning is done. We have our function. You can see from here. So when you click on the output, you will see that you can see that your provisioning was successfully. So when you go here, you can see that your app is deployed. is created successfully. So the next thing we need to do is that we want to deploy the project we just created into our Azure account. Now, to deploy your project, simply come down to your workspace here. So in your workspace, you can see your Azure function here, and then you can see your storage, your database account, your storage account. But down here, you can see that you have a local project. So which was the one we just created. So, and in it, you see two functions. You can create another function in this particular project, or you can deploy it into your Azure account. So we want to deploy it. To deploy it, we simply click on the cloud logo at the top at your right hand side. So let's click on that. And now at the top, they are going to ask us in which of the functions that we created in Azure that we want to deploy it. So this is the first one I created first, and this is the one that we just created right now. So we are deploying our project in this particular function. So we choose that one, and then we wait. So it is going to ask us that anytime you are deploying an app, this particular prompt will come. So it will tell you that if you have some old code or some old app running, it's going to override that. So I'll just click on deploy, and then I'll wait. So now that the deployment is done, you can see that our deployment is done. So now that our deployment is done, so let's go and view it. So you can see deployment is done. To view that the deployment, we click on view output. And as you can see, our deployment was successfully. And you will see at the down here that we have that warning, some HTTPS requests cannot be displayed because of the type of function we chose, which was a function. So when you come back to the top here, you will see that the authentication level for our app was this. So because of this, it will not display the URL for us to be able to access our function in our project. So you can see that our function is working. Now, how do you get this particular URL to test? So the first thing you can do is that you can either access it in your Azure portal or still in your VS Code. Just click on your function, and then you see the function you just created, which is this one, the weather app function 001. You click again. Now you will see that all the deployment that happened, and then your files and everything, you can go through this, the logs. But then when you click on the function again, now you can see we have a weather app that is created for us here with an F. So this shows that this is where you can get the URL. So you simply right click on it, and you can see you can delete the function, you can start it, you can stream the logs directly here. So just copy the URL. Now let's go to our browser. Paste it in our browser. Let me maximize that. And as you can see, our function is working successfully. So you can see, so what you see at the top here. So what we see here, when you look at the URL, so this particular test, that is the security code I'm talking about. So if it was anonymous, you wouldn't see this particular security code coming with it. So, but because we set our function to a security level, that is why we are seeing this. So it means that anytime we want to access this particular function, and we don't pass a security code, the function will not work. So we always need this particular security code to get the function to do what? To work. So now that we have our function running, let's send the same URL to Postman. Let's paste it. And run. So it is asking me to pass a city name. So as you can see, everything is working all right. Let's pass a city name. So we come back to the parameter. So you can see Postman automatically notice the code, the security code. So it's assigned as code. So you can see it here. So let me pass another key, which is city. And then I will say New York. This should not work because we didn't pass our OpenAI API key to our virtual environment in Azure when we deployed. So let's test that and see whether I'm right. So as you can see, open weather key that isn't working. So when we come back to our browser as well, let's test it in our browser. So because we already have equal to here, we need to use end at the top, at the last. So we'll do end. City is equal to New York. And you can see it is telling us that OpenWeather API key is not set. Now, the question is, how do we set our API key in a virtual environment in Azure? So let's go back to our Azure portal and get that done. So log into your Azure portal. So in your Azure portal, search for functions. So you see function app, choose that, and you see all the functions you have running. So the one that we just created is this particular one. So let's choose that. So we are in this particular function running. And as you can see from the bottom here that we have HTTPS trigger, which is enabled. So it means that our function is working. So you can go through it. When you come to overview, it tells us the URL of the function. When you copy this and you visit, it's just going to show you a simple website. But then that doesn't show you the actual URL that you call into your project. So you can just take a look at it, the service plan name, so you can see the region in which it is deployed, the subscription. You can check the matrix here and so on. Now, how do you see the files? The function files, the files you just deployed to Azure. So when you want to look at the files, you simply just come here. And this is where you see all the files that you created. But you can edit the files here because you use your VS Code to deploy it. And as you can see at the top here, so if you want to do the editing, you need to do the editing in your VS Code. So you can see this is our function that we just deployed. Now, say you created your function manually in your Azure account and you want to deploy. Say I have my code in GitHub and I want to deploy. You can simply come to deployment and then you click on it. And then you can choose GitHub. And then you can choose the organization. Because I've already logged in, I have Robert Yenji as my GitHub name. So it will show you choose the organization and you choose the repo. Then you choose the branch and then you can simply deploy directly from GitHub. But I deploy my own directly from my VS Code, so I don't need that. Environment, to set our environment variable, you simply come to settings. When you come to settings, you are going to see environment variables. So you click on environment variables. So these are all the environment variable in your project. So say you have a key, or say you have something you want to hide in a virtual environment. You can use the environment variable to do that. So to do that, I simply come to my environment variable. I'll click on add new, just add. Then I'll pass the name of the environment variable here. So as you can see, so let me go back to my code and take a look at that. So the name of my environment variable was this. So I'm going to copy that. OpenWeather API key. So I'll copy that. Go back to my Azure portal. Then I'll paste it here. So the next thing is that my API key value. So the value that you want to pass to, the value for your environment variable, the name. So it's an API key. So I'll copy my API key here and then I'll set it as well. Now I'll click on apply. Then I'll confirm. Confirming will restart the application for you. So my application should be restarted. Now that my environment variable is added, let me go and test it again and see. So let me refresh this and I should have a response. And just like that, my function is working. The function I just deployed to Azure is working beautifully. Let me go to Postman as well. Let me refresh this and see. And as you can see, directly from Azure. My application is working, my function is working. Let me visualize that as well. So visualize. So as you can see, it's working beautifully. So let me go back to parameters. Let me change this to the name of the city to Accra and see. Let me send that again. And as you can see, everything is working the way it's supposed to work. So it means that my function is working beautifully. Now let's go back to our Azure portal and take a look at something. So come to overview, and then you scroll down where you see your application at the top with an HTTPS trigger enabled. So you can come to invocations, click on more. So with your invocations, you'll be able to see the successful counts in the last 30 days. So you can see all the calls I just made are being counted. So I have 8, 13. So all the requests that I've just submitted and I've gotten a response from it will all be counted here. Then I can also take a look at my logs. So say you want to take a look at your logs, you can basically do that as well. So your code too, you want to take a look at your code, you can take a look at your code here as well. So this is my code, and as you can see, I can't edit this code in my portal because I use my VS Code to do the editing. So permissions are set on this particular code. So, and you can see you can get the URL here directly. So when you click on the URL, we have 3 types of keys. So you can choose which one you want to use. The default. We have the default key, the master key. So each of it they basically work the same. So you choose which one you want to use in your project, and then you go ahead and you use. So this is what I wanted to show you. And that is that. So you can see that we have our function working beautifully in our Azure portal. So that is it for the function. So you can see that the function is working successfully. The next part is we are going to build a Django project, and now we are now going to take the name of the city and pass it to our function. So the first thing we are going to do is that we are going to start our Django project. So let's open our terminal. So our terminal is open. Let's maximize that. So I want to create my project in my documents folder. So let me cd into that. Now here, and let me check to see if I have Python installed as well globally. So Python -- version. I have Python installed. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I need to install Django, and I want it installed in a virtual environment. So I need to create a virtual environment here. Remember that I have virtual environment installed and I have virtual environment wrapper installed. So that is giving me access to be able to create my virtual environment on my Windows machine. So to create my virtual environment, I simply do mk virtual env, then the name of the virtual environment I want to give. So I'm going to call my virtual environment weather app. So my virtual environment is being created. Let's give it a minute. So as you can see, my virtual environment is created and it is activated. So, and you can see it from my left hand side here on my terminal that my virtual environment is activated and I'm in my virtual environment now. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I want to install Django in this particular virtual environment. So pip install Django. So let's give it a minute. It is pulling that and then installation will start. Let's clear our screen, CLS. So now that we have Django installed, the next thing we are going to do is that we are going to create a Django project. So to create a Django project, we simply use the command to create a Django project, which is Django dash admin start project, then the name of the project. So I'm going to call my project weather app. So I'll start the project. So now that my project is created, to cd into my Django project. So cd, then the name of the project, which is weather app, if I remember. Yes, so I got the spelling correct. So I'm in my weather app right now. Let me see the files in that particular directory. So I can see my manage.py is here. So you can see that my Django app is created. Now that my Django app is created, you know that with Django you need to create an app inside your parent directory. So I'm going to create an app. So I will call my app weather. So to do that, I'll simply do Python manage.py, then start app, then the name of the app. So now I can see that my Python app, my Django app, my app is also created. So from this point, you can simply do Python manage.py run server, and your Django app should be up. So as you can see, I don't have migrations yet. So if I copy this particular URL and I visit it in a browser, my Django app should be up. So as you can see, this is up. So the next thing I want to do is that I want to open this particular project in my Visual Studio Code, and then I will continue with my editing. So as you can see, this is just a code to just take the data for us. Then later we are going to manipulate. So what I'm doing is that I'm just assigning my city variable here to default as London. Then I'm going to call the URL, which is my function URL. So this is the URL that is going to be fetching data, is going to be pushing the data to Azure, our Azure function. So I need to put the URL here. So basically this URL works like an API key. So you can see that the name of my function on Azure is here. And this was the URL we're using to execute our function. So you can see it's just a URL with our key here. One thing I can also tell you is that you can put this particular function in your environment variable as well. This particular URL, you can put it in your environment variable as well, so that it will not be exposed like this in your code if you wish. So if everything works, we should have a JSON file, or we should have a response from our function directly in our console when we run this particular code. So let's run that and see. So we go back to our browser. So we go back to our browser. Now we refresh this. As you can see, we've not installed requests. So let's go back to our VS Code and do that. Let's stop this. So pip install requests. Python manage.py run server. So let's go back and refresh. It's telling me I still don't have requests installed. So let me see why I don't have. So now that I have requests installed, I need to import it. So import requests. So yes, so you can see it's gone here. So it is still telling me I have this here. Let me cancel that and restart the app. So they are telling me the template doesn't exist. So let me set that as well. So weather.template. Let me come back here. Come to my app folder and create a template folder. So I'm creating a directory folder. So I'm going to call it templates. Then in that particular directory, I'm going to create my template here. So now that my template is created, let me take a look at it in my code again to see if I referred it well. So let me take this off. Refresh and let's see. Okay, so it means that everything works now. Let me go and check that in my console. I should have a response, a JSON response. So everything works. But you see that I didn't print my response out. So I want to print my response out. So let me do that. So print. So I want to do that. So print. Then this particular weather. So this is what is fetching the data in JSON format for me. So let me print that. So print. So now let's go and refresh. So we should have a JSON response now. And as you can see, so everything is working beautifully. So you can see that our data is working the way it's supposed to work. So now, instead of assigning a default city here, we want to take the city from users. So I'm going to simply I'm going to design a UI, a simple UI to get that done for us. So, okay, so now my UI is done. So as you can see, this is a beautiful UI. So all the users have to do here is they will enter the city, the name of the city. So far, if they visit for the first time, they don't see any weather forecast. So the moment they enter a city and they submit, then they are going to get a response. Now, I've also done a modification to the code. So let me go to our VS Code and then I'll explain what we just did to you. So in our view.py, the first thing we are going to do is that we are going to take the data, the city data from our users in our browser. So when we get the data, we are going to take it by posts. So you can see that I extended it to here at the last part, which is end city. So the variable is stated here. So anytime somebody enters the name of the city will be appended here and then posted to our Azure function. So all I just did here is I filtered the data a little bit. When I get the data in my JSON format, then I then format the data in a way that I want to present it to my users so that they'll be able to understand. So basically what you see here is just gibberish and they'll not be able to understand. So I will have to format the data and make it a bit clean so that when they are looking at it, they should be able to understand what is going on. So what I just did was a little bit of modification and cleaning up this particular data. So you can see that there are places where I just took, so this place like this, there are places where I just took only the icon, the weather icon. So you can see there are, so let me show you that. Okay, so when you come to somewhere like this, so I'm just taking the date for today. So say I want to get the data, the current weather forecast for this specific day. So I'm searching my data on July 3rd. So on July 3rd, I will take that particular date now, and then when I do the request, I'll filter the dates based on today's dates, and then I will get the time. Then I'll use that as my current weather forecast, which was the time that the person searched for the weather forecast. Then I can now pass the rest the way I want it. Now, the date was not really clean. So let's go back to our Postman. So you see the way the date is. It wasn't really clean for me. So I had to clean it up a bit, which is what I did here. So I just formatted the date, made it a little bit clean. Then I added a little bit of graph. So that is where the graph data to as well. So I took some of the data, so the temporary data, the daily, then I filtered it in a nice way, presented it, and then I formatted it. So basically, this is what it does. So I did a little bit of a detailed view too as well. So when you get access to the code, you can take a look at all that. So for the view, I'm just going to be using sessions. So in order for me to be able to use this, I need to apply my migrations. So as a bonus, I'm going to also show you how to connect your Postgres database into your project. So when we deploy, I'm going to show you that. So let me do my migrations. So now that my migrations are applied successfully, so all I want to do is I want to be using sessions to actually catch the data and present it as detail page. So which was why I built this particular extra view for that. So I'm going to show you all of that in a minute. To our browser, let's refresh. Yes, so as you can see, you are seeing a beautiful response. So you can see, so today's weather for New York. So we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you can see all the weather for it, and you can see this was the logo I extracted, and this is the sky. So this is the weather description, which is clear sky as of today. So, and I plotted the graph, the weather also in a nice graph, which is from today to Sunday. So you can see I plotted it from today, which is a Tuesday, 2nd July. So you can see I plotted that. So you can see, you can take a look at it. You can basically just look at the maximum temperature. You can cancel it out here, the minimum temperature. You can take that out, and then you can take a look at the flow. So you can take this also off, and you'll be able to read and understand. So, and that is that. So let's try and search another city. So let's say Accra. So you can see it's working beautifully. Let's say Lagos. As you can see, let's say which city again? Which city again should we search? So let me say Yonkers again, because I'm in Yonkers, New York. So you can see Yonkers, everything is formatted nicely and beautifully. So we can see we just created our weather app using an Azure function. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to deploy this into Azure. So when you are done with this, what you have to do is that you have to push your code to GitHub. So we are going to be doing our deployment from GitHub. So you will have to do that. Also, I'm going to give you access to this particular code, so you can have access to it on GitHub, and you can use it in your own project. So now that our project is done, let's go and do our deployment. So we come back to our Azure portal. Now we are going to search for web apps. So web apps. I want web apps with database. So you can see I have web app with databases here. So I'll click on that. I'll give it a minute. So now that is done, so I'm going to choose a resource group. I want it to be in the same resource group as a function. So I'll choose that. I want it to also be in the same region as a function because of latency. So I'm going to choose that as well. Now I need to give my weather app a name. So I'm going to call it weather app 000001. Then the stack. So we need to choose a stack. So I'm going to use Python 3.10. So I just want everything should be uniform. So I'm going to choose that. Then the engine. So which type of Postgres do you want to use? So I'm going to use, which type of database do you want to use? So I'm going to use the Postgres flexible server. So I'm going to choose that. So the server name, I'm going to leave it as this. The database name, I'm going to leave it as this as well. If you want to use cache for Redis, you can use that, but I'm not going to use that. So I'll leave that as no. But it's always very good to use cache in your project. That is if you are doing a full stack project, but I'm just doing something, a demo for you to know how some of these things are done. So, and I'll choose the plan. So the plan, I'm going to change it to basic. I'm not doing any production work. So this is just for hobby. So I'll review. I don't want to add any tags, so I'll just review. When everything is set, then I'll create my app. So you can see everything is set. So you can see your username here. If you wish, you can copy it somewhere, but we can still have access to that. I will show you where to have access to it in your project. So, but let me copy it somewhere just in case. So then my password, I'm going to copy that as well. You have access to it. I will show you where to have access to it in on your Postgres server, but let me just copy that. Then I'll click on create. Now let's wait for our web app should be deployed, and then our database should also be created. So let's give it a minute. So as you can see, our deployment is done. So let's go into our app deployment. So we click on resources. What I want to do is that I want to deploy my app. So what I'm going to do is I'll come to deployment. So come to deployment center. Still in the app, then I'll click on deployment center. The first thing it's going to ask you is it's going to ask you the source. Do you want to deploy your code from external manually, or you have a repo you want to use? So in my case, I deployed my code into GitHub, so I'm going to use that. So I'll choose GitHub. If you are not logged in at this point, they will ask you to log in. You'll be given access to log in, so you simply log into it. So because I'm already logged in, so you can see my GitHub name, username pops up here. So I would now choose my organization, which is my name. Then I'll choose the repo I want to use. So this is the repo I want to use. So this one. So I'll choose that. Now it will ask me the branch. So you need to choose a branch you want to use. So I'll choose the main branch. So it's going to ask me other type of authentication settings. So user assigned authentication or basic authentication. For this part, I'm just going to leave it as that. You choose there is the subscription type, the identity as well. So I'm going to create a new identity for it. So I'm going to call this. So I'm just going to choose this. Then, and that should be it. So all you have to do at this point is save. So whilst this is saving, whilst our deployment is going on, so you can see our deployment is still in progress. So to see that, you come to the logs, you click here, it will bring you to your Azure, to your GitHub, and then you'll be able to monitor your deployment. So as you can see, my deployment is in progress. So let me give it a minute. Whilst this is going on, let's go ahead and assign our environment variable. So we come back to our GitHub, come to our settings, then let me maximize this. Then our settings, then our environment variable. Then I'll click on add new. So let me go and copy the name from my code directly. So my settings. So the environment variable I gave was secret key. So I'm going to copy that. Come back to my portal and paste it. Now the value for my environment variable. So the value, I'm going to copy the value to. Give me a minute. So I'm copying the value, pasting the value here as well. So all I have to do is click on apply, then click on restart if the deployment is done. So at this point, our project is working successfully. So the next thing I want us to change is you can see that the URL is not secure. So I want to do that. So I will come back to my dashboard. I want to redirect all my traffic to a secure TLS. So let me do that. Okay, so to do that, so I'll come to configuration. So on my configuration, you scroll down. So you can see HTTP version. So SSH is on. So I'll on that for the meantime because I'll be using that. Then always on, off, session off, HTTP. So I'll on this. Then I can choose a TLS version I want to use. And that should be that. And then I'll click on save. So now that is saved, let's refresh this and see. So, and as you can see, so all the traffic is going to be redirected to encrypted TLS. So we can see our app is done. The next thing we want to do is we want to connect our Postgres database to it into our project and do our migrations. So to do that, we'll come back to our portal again. So we'll come to our app. So on the app, let's go to overview. What we need is our database configuration. So when you come to your deployment variables, you should be able to see that we have some Postgres keys value here. A string connection is created here. So we need to go to this particular database and do some settings, and then we can do that. We can use that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to the database. So we come to Postgres server. So we search for it here. Database for Postgres. Let's choose that. So this will create it for us. We don't need that. So you can just go to the resource group. So this is a resource group. So to do that, let's go to the database still here. So let's go to the resource groups. So this particular resource group. So let's look for so this is our Postgres web server. So this is our database web server. So let's open that. So as you can see, our web server is here. So when we take a look at it, we come to our databases. We'll see the databases that we have. So, and this is the database that we created for this particular project. So this is a database we are going to be using. So let's click on connect. And then now you can see the connection variables. So in order to be able to connect it, let's go back to our project in our GitHub repo. We will be using all this in an environment variable. So let's go and set those environment variable in our project in our settings.py. So we'll go back to our GitHub repo, come down to where the databases are. So I already have this particular project. So I'm just going to copy the environment variables here and send it to the new project we are working on. So we scroll it. So this is the database part of the project. So I'll replace this with this. So it's not editable. So let me change that. So I'll replace that with this. So, and now all I have to do is that I have to assign all this environment variable in my database. So the first one is the database name. So to simply do that, let me just come back here. Let me copy this somewhere so that I won't have to be going back and forth. So I'll just copy it directly. So the first thing we are going to assign is as you can see, so the first we are going to be assigning is the database, the DB name, the DB host, DB's user, and then the password. So we can just commit that. So updated to settings.py. So I'll just put 2 to it. Then I'll click on submit. So now that this is set, I'll just scroll back to databases. Let me copy the variables. So DB name, I'll copy that. Come back to my projects. Come to my environment variables. Add environment variable. So the first one we are adding is a DB, our DB name. So what is the name of the database? So the database name we are using. This is the one I just copied somewhere safe where I can just replace it here as easily. So I'll click on add. Then I'll add another one. Come back to my repo. The next one is the host, DB host. I'll copy that as well. Come here, DB hosts. And then I'll copy this. Put this here. So this is my DB host. And then I'll add another one. So my database name, my user password. So I'll just put this here. So I have the password here. Come back to my GitHub repo. Copy password. Come back here and paste it there. And add. Then the last one in the repo is my username. So I'll copy my username as well. Come back again. Add that as well. And then my user. So the name of my user is here. So I will add that. So this is the name of my user. I'll click on that. So, and the password, I think the password I gave is the same as the user. So let me change that. So remember, I saved the password somewhere. So I have it. So let me copy that and change that with this. So this will now be the new password. Remember when I was creating the database, I copied a password for when I created the database. So this is the password that was created. You can keep this saved somewhere. So when all this is done, all you have to do is you click on apply, confirm. So let me make sure that it's saved here as well. This is safe. So all I have to do right now is because I added new environment database variables here and I save, I have to resync those updates in my deployment. So I'll come back to my deployment. Come back to my deployment center. So, and I'll resync that. So let's give it a minute. The new update should be effected. So let's take a look at the logs. So this is pending. Let's wait. When that is successful, then it means that we can do our migrations now. So the next thing we need to do is we can SSH into our project right now. So we come back, we come down to deployment tools. So click on deployment tools, then the SSH. So you click on SSH. So as you can see, if I've already opened it, I just close that. So the SSH is loading. So you can see if it's green, it means that there's a successful SSH connection. SSH. So as you can see, it's green. So all we want to do right now is that, so it shows you that our Postgres database is connected successfully. So all we have to do is do pip python manage .py migrate. And that is it. So you can see that our database is connected successfully. So anything you do right now is going to be written into that particular database. So we've been able to build a beautiful website like this using Azure Functions and Django. If you have not already subscribed to our channel, kindly subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and see you in the next video.